Hey everyone, thanks for joining us for another episode of The Lion, the Way, and the War, where we talk about Jesus, His church, and the spiritual battle that surrounds us. My name is Craig Allison, and I'll be your host. Okay, joining me today is Brandon Bonner, and I am excited to talk to him because he is still part of the Christian Student Center after spending the last several years as one of our student ambassadors. However, you are going to be graduating in a few weeks, not walking, but technically graduating. You've got a job lined up at TVA, I believe, about to get married in just a few short days. And so your journey is one that I want to highlight with the next several guests because it speaks to the power of building relationships with people and what can become this ripple type effect. So what have you been up to lately, Brandon?
Well, school's all online right now, so a lot of schoolwork. Work is also, they're making us work from home. I'm an intern at TVA, so that's how I've got lined up to get a full-time job there. And then, of course, wedding plans have just been shifted completely. So very spur-of-the-moment planning and getting ready for being married and graduating college and starting full-time employment.
So you've got a lot of stuff going on in your life right now, and I'm sure the virus has impacted you like it's impacted everybody else. So what are the major impacts that you've noticed over the last couple of weeks with the virus and your future plans to be married and work and all that?
Well, I think some of the biggest things, I was kind of excited when school was canceled for 2 weeks, but now looking at it, that it's going to be canceled for the rest of the semester, or not canceled, but moved to online classes for the rest of the semester. It's really difficult because there's a lot of people that I'll get to see again, but it's just weird. My senior year was just cut very short, so I guess that was a big impact. Another big impact would be work. I haven't really worked from home that much before, and to transition fully from working from home is a challenge because there's a lot of distractions. There's a lot of, it's just weird being in a different environment. And then, of course, wedding plans, just because of the shelter-in-place orders, we can't have a wedding over 10 people. So, we had to postpone our ceremony till August, and now we're having a very small ceremony Saturday.
Yeah, as I'm talking to more and more people, and you're really not having an appreciation for just how big of an impact this has had on your age group. Marriage plans. I mean, that's a huge, like one of the biggest things you do in your life, and graduating from college is right there with it. And all of a sudden, these two major milestones in your life have been completely, I don't want to say wrecked, but I mean, I can't imagine. I mean, if I'm thinking back to when I graduated and somebody, all of us, I put all that work in, and then they're like, well, guess what? We can't walk because of this. And I know some people don't care to walk, and that's not a big deal. But, just the whole pomp and circumstance and having your family there and congratulating you, that's a big deal. And I say all this to say that I really haven't observed your age, your demographic, and the ones I've talked to, is just you're taking it in stride. And I don't know, maybe you're just faking it really well, or it really is just like, you know what, I have no control over this, and whatever happens. I mean, do you care to explain that to me from your like generation, like what your I'm struggling with the words here, but basically your outlook, your whole demeanor on it is, to me, it's impressive.
Well, I think a big piece of it, well, first off, it is very unfortunate, and I think that I'm upset that I'm not able to walk. UTC is allowing us to walk in August, so it's not necessarily, it's not canceled. I'm just moved back till August, so it's not the end of the world for me. I guess the biggest piece of it was the wedding. Lexi and I have been planning our wedding for about 2 years, and you've been a part of that process quite a bit. And just to plan and put so much effort and time and money into a day to celebrate our lives together for a virus to come along and start in December, and then a couple months later, like the whole world's shutting down, and the United States is shutting the economy down, and we can't even gather more than 10. I mean, I have a close family that I'd love to share this day with us, and now it's postponed. So it is unfortunate. It's been hard for us, and I think that we're just trying to look forward and say, well, it's not necessarily canceled. It's just pushed a little further back. That planning isn't necessarily all gone to waste. It's just moved slightly.
I've got some Kleenex right over there. Do you need? I thought you were getting choked up a little bit there.
No.
But, okay, so I want to move on a little bit. Tell me, how did you come to learn about the Christian Student Center? How did all of that materialize?
So I have a little bit different story than most people coming to the Student Center. I actually went to high school with Harrison, which is Craig's son, and we met our junior year of high school. Well, we met freshman year, but we started becoming friends junior year of high school. Started getting pretty close. He invited me to come over to the house, and we'd hang out with a few of our friends, and just started to develop a really good bond and strong relationship. And then he invited me to come to church. So I would come on Saturday night, spend the night, get up, go to church, and same on Wednesdays. Wednesdays after school, would come over to the house, eat dinner, and then go to church. So that's kind of started me going to Central. And to be honest, the real reason that I kept coming back to Central was just the food. You guys fed me really well. Zaxby's was the one meal that I remember.
And we never eat Zaxby's. That's you remember that, but we never, like, literally that was the only time we stopped and got Zaxby's.
Yeah, I just remember Harrison going, "Do you want some Zaxby's after school?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'll eat some Zaxby's." And then he's like, "We're also going to church." And I was like, "Well, that's fine. I guess I can do that too, but Zaxby's is real good." But my youth minister at the time was Cody Harrington, which was a student director. I think he was in his junior year. And it was his first year being a youth minister. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think so. He was doing some internship for Central Church of Christ at the time.
So we started to develop a really good relationship, and Cody was at your house a lot, and Cody was encouraging me and Harrison to attend devotionals and stuff at the Student Center a lot. So I found myself watching these college kids and their enthusiasm and their relationships they had with each other at this building that I thought was just some weird frat house when I first saw it, and then came in and saw all these people having these Bible studies and these relationships being built, and found myself wanting that when I got to college. So I went through my senior year. My faith journey really didn't start. I guess the difficult part for me didn't start until college started. So senior year was just kind of a breeze for me, faith-wise. I wasn't really in the game, I guess you can say. Mm-hmm. And freshman year, it was no option. I was coming to the Student Center. But I remember sitting in one of my first, I think it was anthropology classes, and the guy got up there and basically said, Christian thought and Christianity is good to have, but it's not really true. Here's how we actually got here, and so forth, and started explaining the theory of evolution. And then I remember coming to talk to you and saying, what do you think about this? Because this is a guy with a PhD. Obviously, he's pretty smart, saying this to all these students that are in college. And then that kind of started our Bible study.
Okay. So thinking back, all of the experience that you've gone through these past 4 years, what was it that made the biggest impact on you?
Well, I would say biggest impact, there's two things that come to mind. I think that first Bible study was a big impact. A lot of questions that I had, I never even thought that I had, started to come up, and we would talk through those and find scripture and search the scriptures, and that was a good experience for me. But another huge piece was definitely relationships. I mean, the people at the Student Center that I was surrounded by were intentional, and they truly cared about where I was going, what direction I was going. And seeing that type of leadership and seeing that type of dedication to one's faith and to others' faith really made me want to become a student ambassador and serve others and be a servant. So I guess the biggest impact was personal Bible studies and then relationships.
Okay. So how do you think that your view of Christianity, as opposed to someone who like myself, was raised in the church, and it's always been part of our lives. And for you coming into it as a high school student, and it never really being a thing for you, the difference there in your viewpoint on spirituality, on Christ, on what He means to you versus a person like myself that's been raised in the church.
There's definitely a huge impact you have when you go through most of your life. Well, not most of my life up to that point, 16 years, 17 years of my life, not really knowing what Christianity was about, what church was about, and not really knowing who Jesus was, to learn it all and to have people study scripture with you and show you that this stuff is real. It is fact. It's not just a belief that some people have, but it doesn't really matter because it's not true. So that being revealed to you definitely builds motivation. One thing that was different for me, I came to Central, never went to church prior to going to Central. So the Church of Christ doctrine was something that I was exposed to, and it was the only thing I was exposed to. I didn't know that there was other stuff out there. And that's kind of where Lexi and I crossed paths. Is she went to a non-denominational church. I believe they consider themselves non-denominational, but very contemporary. Had worship band and lights and huge. I mean, we're talking 400 or 500 people at that time. Now they're looking closer to 1,000 people. So huge church, growing youth program. I mean, they had their own youth building. It was just extremely different scenery, different environment. So when I first started going to her church, just visiting, it was a huge shock for me because I was like, well, there's this very traditional church, which seemed like, just an old way of thinking versus new, modern, fresh, young Christianity is how I first thought about it. So that was a big struggle to start to, why do we do things the way we do them?
Yeah, and that, if I remember correctly, that caused some contentions between you and Lexi and put a strain on the relationship because, you were having the questions and she was coming from a standpoint, which, by the way, I was going to get into this later. I'm actually going to be talking to Lexi. She's my next podcast. So, we're going to kind of have a continuation of our discussion right now and get her, get the other side of it, her viewpoint and her transition into it. So, that caused some issues between the two of you, did it not?
It did. At first we had some discussions and they weren't that bad, but then questions, as we grew our relationship together, questions started to come up like, well, if this were to last longer, what are we going to split the household? You're going to go to church, one church on Sunday, I'm going to go to a different one. And then questions started to come up like, well, why don't you use instruments in the church? And to be honest, I was ignorant on it. I didn't know why we didn't. I just said, well, because that's what the Bible says. And she'd say, well, where does it say that? And I'm like, I don't know, but I heard them talk about it in church, and it's just there somewhere. Or, other issues would come up too, and I could just never go to the scriptures and say, look, this is what it says. And we could never have conversations about it because I didn't know. I didn't know where it was. I didn't know if it was there. I was just trying to fight something that I didn't have any scriptural evidence for.
Yeah. Okay, so you've had a lot of Bible studies with students over the years since you've been at the Christian Student Center, which came about because you built relationships with those people and you got to a point where you felt comfortable asking them, hey, why don't we have a Bible study? And I want you to talk a little bit about the impact, with Harrison asking you, and he has no idea what that's going to lead to with you, who would eventually be baptized, you would become a Christian, and you yourself would bring a whole lot of other people to Christ through that. So if you don't mind, just kind of sharing how that has impacted you and the whole kind of cycle of the importance of, just asking somebody, inviting somebody, hey, you want to come grab a bite to eat?
Well, I think what was huge about it is Harrison never came up to me and said, hey, Brandon, I noticed that you're not a Christian. You should become one. Come to church with me. It was very much, we eased into it, and he invited me to do stuff that that would allow us to develop a relationship. And then he would say, hey, come to church. And Harrison never talked to me specifically about church or scriptures or anything like that. He just got me in the place I needed to be, and he knew that there were other people there that would be able to talk to me, and Cody was that person. So I think that's a huge example of how we all have our own different pieces of the puzzle. I may not be able to reach so-and-so that comes in the student center, but I know that the people I work with or the people that are surrounded in that place might be able to reach them. And that's something very important to remember. You're not going to be able to have a Bible study with every single person that you come in contact with. Either A, you're just not going to get through to them. B, you don't have enough time. C, you just may never be able to find the appropriate way to ask. Because, you just don't want to go up to some random person and say, hey, let's have a Bible study. I don't know you, I don't know your name or anything, but we should have a Bible study. It won't work. You're never going to get past that shallow level of a relationship. So I think it's important to understand that we all have different pieces. And another big thing about the Bible studies that I had, which, I don't know if I told the people that I studied with or not, but it was more impactful for me than it probably was for them. I think Bible studies are a great way to grow your personal faith and your personal scriptural knowledge, because if I'm studying with you and you're a freshman and you're either new to Christianity or maybe you've been a part of the church for many years, your entire life, you're probably going to look at me and say, hey, you asked me to have a Bible study with you. You probably have some knowledge about the Bible. Or you probably know what you're talking about. And if you just go into this study blind and you have no idea, then it may not work in your favor. It may not go well. So I think it's important to obviously study yourself. So that was how I jump-started me studying into the scriptures.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, because I've always told people that the best way to learn something is to teach it yourself, because it really forces you to get into it, because you don't want to look like somebody that doesn't know anything and get questions. You're like, you know what? Well, I want to do this Bible study, but I actually have no idea, which is okay. Because I've been asked questions before, and I'm like, you know what? That's a really good question. I've never been asked that before. Let me study it and get back to you. But the Christian Student Center, most people think Bible studies, they think Bible, they think church, they think boring, and I don't see that at the student center. And I'm not taking responsibility for that, but the dynamic there is, here we are at a state university, and we have students coming in who seem to be really eager to learn the Bible. What's up with that?
Well, I think that for me, just seeing a lot of these people come in, and I think last year, my junior year was the most impactful for me, because we had a bunch of freshmen, huge inflow of freshmen compared to other years. And what was different about this year is so many different faith backgrounds. We had people from the Methodist Church, from the Catholic Church, we had Baptist. We just had all across the spectrum. We had different faith backgrounds, and they come in and they see that we do things a little differently. We don't use instruments, of course. Women aren't in leadership roles and so forth. And they start to ask these questions. Hey, why do you do it this way? Well, why can't I do this, or why can't I do this? So you start to study, and people just get this fire about them that say, wow, the scriptures say this. This is proof. The things that you do have scriptural backing. There's a reason for it. I can see it. They don't always agree with it, but most of the time they can see it. And that just starts this huge just outflow of motivation. Like, I want to learn more. What else is in this Bible that I don't know? They didn't grow up, and me too, I didn't grow up hearing this stuff my entire life. It's just all new. It's all fresh. And it kind of creates some excitement. Like, what else is out there? What else is in the Bible?
And one of the things, too, that at least I've seen is, when I was in college and there were doctrinal differences, because granted, the Church of Christ and I'm using that term as like a denominational term, even though we consider the Church of Christ as a whole, consider ourselves as non-denominational, but just for the simplicity of understanding this, as a group of people categorized as, conservative, Church of Christ, denominational, there was a very dogmatic approach to it. And that is really something that turned a lot of people off, I think, to it. And at the student center, we don't compromise on clear doctrinal issues, but we're also not beating people over the head with it, saying things like, well, if you don't believe this, you're doomed to hell. And I think that has been a really great thing to bring people to the place where they don't feel intimidated, and they actually do want to dig in deeper and deeper and study. Is that an accurate assessment?
I think so. And another thing, what I think is important when you go into a Bible study with someone is you have to develop, you have to further your relationship. When I look at a Bible study, I wouldn't just see it as an opportunity to further scriptural knowledge and biblical knowledge, which obviously is the main goal, but also as an opportunity to grow a relationship with each other. I made some of the strongest bonds and relationships at the student center, and they started with a Bible study. And typically, the first Bible studies that I would have, if someone either asked me to have a Bible study or asked them to have a Bible study, the first time we'd meet, we would hardly ever crack open the Bible. We would just talk about what's your background, where did you come from, stuff like that, to kind of get an understanding of their thoughts. And I would ask them questions that they may have never been asked before. Like why, I had a study with two guys that grew up in the Catholic Church, and we would ask them questions like, well, why do you think that you do things this way? And it was hard for them to answer, and they would go study it up, and they would typically come back and have some sort of answer, and then we'd find scripture. We'd talk through scripture and say, well, have you ever thought of it this way? Have you ever thought of the church being set up like this? And here's scripture that points me to believe that. And through that process, you're kind of showing them that you're open-minded, so you're willing to listen and to think and consider their thoughts, so they're also open-minded and willing to consider your thoughts.
Yeah, I want to underscore something that you said there, which is through the Bible study process, you're continuing to build relationships. And I can't underscore that enough. To anybody that's listening right now, and you're wanting to invite somebody to church, you're wanting to talk to them about Jesus Christ, the CSC is a great model for that. You and I were on a mission trip not too long ago where in the Dominican Republic, where they use a model that is pretty much identical to the way we do things at the CSC, and that's having activities. That's kind of that bottom rung kind of thing, because you have to have activities in order to get to know people. And through that, the activities, you begin to build relationships with people. And then the more deep those relationships become, is when you can actually have a trust that begins to develop between two people. And once you have that trust between two people, you begin to have an impact on them. And or in our model, in our paradigm, we're looking at that conversion as that moment where they say, you know what, I truly understand, and I need to give my life over to Christ.
Yeah, and they used a pyramid to show their model, which I think is really good. But I think a good way that we should look at it is it's almost a circle. You never stop the activities. You never stop focusing and building the relationship, and you never stop focusing and building the trust so that you can have an impact. So it's almost this continuous circle that never ends, and I think that's a big thing that happened to me, and it wasn't intentional, but I was baptized the summer before my senior year of high school. So I was baptized. School started. So youth minister Cody, he was super busy. It was his senior year. I just didn't search the scriptures and just kind of dropped off. Just kind of was dipped, and then that was it.
I call that the dip and ditch.
Yeah, dip and ditch, and that was something that stuck with me. And I knew that I didn't want to do the same thing to someone else. So I think it's important when you have these Bible studies, if they're not a Christian and you make that impact, you get to that point and they become a Christian, continue those activities, continue those relationships, continue the trust, because it's a circle. That impact always has to be evolving.
So last question for you today, Brandon. Your biggest struggle as a student at a state university trying to grow your faith. That's part A of the question. What has been the biggest struggle that you faced as a college student? And part B is the impact that the church and the CSC have had on that specifically.
So I think the biggest thing is, of course, it's a public university. So there are things that are pushed and things that are presented to you every single day that aren't in line with the way we should live and walk as a Christian. Some of your closest friends that you've been friends with all through high school, and they follow you to college, and they go their different route, and seeing that and how it's different than the route that you want to be on and the path that you want to walk is difficult. So it's a struggle. Seeing people that even come in the student center and you become friends with them, they don't necessarily stay on that path, and it's a difficult thing. Professors, I've never had any issues except one with a professor. Most of the professors that I've had, some of them actually have been Christians, and we've had some conversations about Christianity, which was awesome. But there was almost this slight fear that I had. I didn't want to make it too obvious that I was a Christian, because I didn't want to step on someone's toes, or I didn't want to hurt someone's feelings or whatever. And I think that's just the wrong way to go about it. Looking back, I think it's okay to be bold as a Christian on a public campus, and I think it's okay to show your beliefs and what you believe in. And that kind of leads in the biggest impact the church and the student center had. It enabled me to be bolder in my Christianity, enabled me to grow stronger. And when I fell into those temptations or fell into those struggles and saw things that I wanted to do to live the quote unquote the college life, I had a church and a group of Christians to fall back on. I had mentors to look at to the church and talk to that were older than me, and then I had peers, people that are the same age as me, to rely on and talk through some of the issues that I was going through.
Appreciate that, Brandon. That's a great answer, and highlights the importance of our community, our family as a church. Absolutely. So next week, you kind of stole my thunder earlier on. I'm going to be talking to Lexi, who, like yourself, came to Christianity through, I would say, kind of an unconventional way. She later on, she wasn't raised in the church or anything like that. So this is kind of part A of an interview that I want to continue the discussion with her, which will be part B, and wrap that up, how the two of you finally came together. And I don't know what your availability is, but I may want to have you pop in at the end of that, and maybe you guys discussing the next step as a married couple going forward with your Christianity. So Brandon, thank you for sharing some personal stuff with me today. I appreciate that. All right, so hopefully you'll join in next week for another episode of The Lion, the Way, and the War. And I think you'll be pleased with the interview we're going to have with Lexi. I think it'll be an enlightening discussion. Final words, Titus chapter 2, 11 and 12. For the grace of God has appeared, bringing salvation for all people, training us to renounce ungodliness and worldly passions, and to live self-controlled, upright, and godly lives in the present age. Folks, be kind to each other and keep God first. Until next week, have a blessed day.